Sims, let's go.
Hello, everyone. It's your girl, Miracle Sims, and you're watching the GSL Talk Show. Tonight, we're going to be chatting with Dr. Stephanie Holmes, and she's going to be sharing all about what it's like to be married to someone with autism and much more. So stay tuned.
Miracle baby, shot chill, Miracle Sims, let's go. Miracle baby, shot chill, Miracle Sims, let's go. Miracle baby, shot chill, Miracle Sims, let's go. But I'm not the type of girl that goes. Yeah, it's a miracle, baby. Shot
Welcome back to the GSL Talk Show. As you all can see, I am here with Reverend Dr. Stephanie C. Holmes. How are you doing?
I am doing well. Thank you for having me, Miracle.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks for coming. Thanks for visiting us here on the GSL Talk Show.
I'm
And
happy to
welcome.
be here. Happy to be here. I've been
Yes.
reading up about you and what you do.
Oh.
So thank you for doing what you do.
Yes, ma'am. I'll try it out here. I'll just try to, be obedient. So tell me a little bit about you and what you have going on. Oh, yeah, and tell us where you're from as well.
Okay, so I'm coming to you from the ATL, Atlanta, Georgia is where I'm at. But I'm originally a Carolina girl. So Carolina is still home. I'm a Carolina girl at heart. But now we call Atlanta home, and we've been here since about 2008, 2009. And that's kind of part of my story. How we got to Atlanta is my oldest daughter was diagnosed on the autism spectrum back in 2005, 2006. After many years of fighting the educational system in North Carolina and not being able to get the support that she needed, we decided to kind of make a move that would be best for my husband's career and for my daughter to get the support that she needed in school. I specifically was looking for housing districts and schools that could support autism. So when we got here, she got the support that she needed. She did well. She lives independently. She's married. It is a great story. Along that line, my husband gets diagnosed on the spectrum too back in 2019. And we started really understanding the differences in our marriage. We call them neurodiverse marriage, where one person's on the spectrum and one person is not on the autism spectrum. And then we created our own show to other couples and families out there who have neurodiversity in their marriage and family. And so then God, after I pulled the Jonah and ran away for a while, that's really what we do is work with neurodiverse families and marriages.
Wow, that is amazing. First of all, I always call out the fact that, I guess we're practically neighbors because I'm here in Georgia as well.
All right, another Georgia peach.
Yeah, it's like one day, man, I'm gonna have a studio and be doing stuff like this in person. But until then, hey,
that's right. Until then, that's what the microphones and the computers are for.
Listen, and it's such a blessing because I had a vision in my mind, and I thought it was gonna be one way versus another way, and then God's doing it this way. But being able to talk to people from around the world because of it being in this capacity it's been a blessing. So, yeah, man, hopefully we'll get a chance to cross paths in person one day.
Cool.
But yeah, I'm glad to be talking to you today and now. So that is quite interesting, the things that you shared already in regards to, I know people talk about autism a lot, and when you brought up the educational system, Lord knows I done had several conversations because I'm, kind of just getting started myself. My son is 5, and I'm like, yeah, we're probably going to do like a virtual public school. We're going to try that out, and so it'll be homeschool vibes and stuff, because I'm just like, you just hear and see too much. So I get it when you say you're making decisions like, okay, we try to do it here, and they don't have what we need. Let's go over here. Like, I don't know. I'm parenting, right?
Right. And trying to figure out, what's the best fit for my child. And sometimes it's public school, sometimes it's private school, sometimes it's a mixed co-op. And so really as a parent, we're tasked with kind of figuring it out for our specific child, even if haters and disagreeers have their comments. This child was entrusted to me, your child was entrusted to you.
Yes.
And that's kind of our job as parents to help figure that out and facilitate what is the best learning environment.
Exactly. I love that. And then I also love that there's so many options now. Because, like, on one hand, now, granted, I put it on the table. I'm not going to sit here and try to act like I'm perfect. I mean, we just a couple of weeks away about getting started on this virtual, school situation with my son, right? And, obviously, I didn't experience that. My husband didn't experience that. So, it's a totally different thing. But I'm like, well, I'm open to trying something different and new. Like, I know people are like, oh, homeschool the kids, blah, 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 social skills. I'm like, if you see my son, he could be right here now, getting to know you, y'all will be friends. Like, I'm not worried about him socially, honestly. So it's like, what I am more concerned about, like, what is he going to learn? And like, I need to probably be involved in, I'm just fearing so much, not to be scared or fearful or whatever, but it's just like when we can make some different decisions or like you say, make the best decision for our family and our son and things of that nature, then, I mean, I'm open to that. I know a lot of people may not be and stuff. They're like, ooh, it has to be this way because this is what we experience. But I just think it's a beautiful thing that there's so many options now available where we can decide again, like, do we want to go that route versus this route? Do we want to move to Georgia or stay, North Carolina? There's options now versus us feeling as if we have to do it the way that we had it and stuff. Because I feel like things are just so different now. Like, I don't know if you observed that.
Yeah, as parents, it's a crazy world, and we need to be very vigilant and intentional, and not as passive and not really believe all the things we're being told by the public school system. So, and that looks different. Like, so for me, because my daughter did need some supports and needed to go through the public school system, I was the best volunteer that public school had. And I decided, like, how can I get the most information? I think I'm going to work outside the discipline office, and I'm going to work in the attendance office, and I'm going to work in the front office, and I'm going to have my eyes and ears open on what is going on in the administrative office. And that's kind of how, and then if they were in an activity, I was the band mom or the person who offered rides, because you kind of get to be front line on what's going on and kind of keeping your eyes and ears open, doing your best to protect, but also to be educated and have your eyes open and pay attention to what you're seeing, and then make the best decision with the wisdom. The Lord says if we seek wisdom, he will give it to us. So it's a different day and age.
Yes. So, I mean, I don't know if you want to share more about that journey or, also, I mean, we definitely want to hear what you have to say about the marriage side of things because, I don't know if other people there might be a lot of undiagnosed people, and so you may be in a similar marriage as, Dr. Stephanie is talking about today, and you may not even know it. And so maybe, there's some things that you can enlighten us on, or I'm sure, like, I'm all ears for these conversations. Where would you want to start? More so about like the school version right now, or we're talking about the marriage? I'm open to both.
Well, we'll kind of go that, when we lived in North Carolina, the marriage was really tough, and I couldn't kind of put my finger on it. When my husband and I podcast or write, we talk about the tale of two marriages. His marriages was going fine, and mine kind of stunk. Mine was miserable, and he was happy. And as long as I didn't have a need or petition or request, things were good. We really thought back in North Carolina, what was difficult about our marriage and family was like, the newly diagnosis of autism and constantly fighting with the school and then the school board. And then, heck, we went all the way up to Raleigh. We lived outside of Charlotte, but I was constantly fighting with people from Raleigh to get like the whole school board felt like it was involved. So we thought like that was, the crux of what was going on and difficulty. So then we moved to Georgia, and my daughter was getting more support. My husband was in a better job, so our finances were better. And I was like, it still feels like something's off. Why is something off? Because a lot of the stress is gone and the finances are better. And I was attending a conference, because that's kind of how I prepared for my daughter, was like I would go to a conference on her next stage of life so I could kind of think about how am I going to help her get there and set the goals. So I was listening to one on transitioning out of high school to college and adults on the spectrum. And I say this all the time, so it's kind of like my shtick now, but I was listening to the conference and the guy starts talking about adults on the spectrum. And I made such a face, something like this, if you're watching it on video, that the speaker said, the lady in the second row has just figured out her husband's on the spectrum. And it was shocking because I, at the time, was a licensed professional therapist. I do this. I diagnose. I have worked with autism at this point, like 10 years. And it's like, how did I miss this in my own marriage? But we weren't talking about the hereditary nature of this. We weren't talking about what used to be called high functioning or Asperger's. You know, my daughter kind of, quote, acted out at school. So that's how she got her diagnosis. And I've known my husband since I was 10. And I wouldn't have, in my mind, it's like, well, he was nothing like Sydney. Like, I've got data points that go back to him from childhood, you know, and I don't see these same things, but he had a different presentation, a different manifestation of autism. And so I want to say this to the listeners. If you have a child who is ADHD or autistic, probably one of the parents are neurodivergent as well.
Wow. Wow, that is definitely quite interesting. I feel like there was some questions, but at the same time, I think maybe I'm mentally doing what you was doing.
Like,
but no,
how did this happen?
No, I get, I do get how, well, one thing I could definitely resonate with is you're saying that it seems like on one hand, the marriage is fine. And then on the other hand, you're like, the marriage is not fine. And then two people having two different experiences with the one experience. Like, I definitely can relate to that. I mean, I've been open and honest here on GSL about, I feel like, again, and here it is again. I know people that's like, oh, here she go. I only have like two things against my husband. You know what I mean? I'm like, I just wish he would do these two things, for example. And I don't know if we want to get all into that. We can, but there's only two things. And for me, it's very frustrating because I feel like my two things are easy. So it's like, why would you just do them? But at the same time, and I hate to be the one to bring the issue to the table because on his end, it seems like he has no issues, even though I know I'm not the perfect wife and I know that I fall short in a lot of areas, you know what I mean? But he doesn't complain about any of that. He's fine with all of it. And then so I feel like I'm the one that's bringing like, I'm fine with everything about you too, except these two things.
Right.
And so
they're pretty major things, but how do we bridge the gap?
Right, and then that's the other thing. I'm like, if they weren't big, then it probably wouldn't be an issue. But since they are big, at least to me, or whatever the case may be, but I feel like it has a lot to do with. Well, I'll just say it on here. I mean, GSL is here for a reason, y'all. Y'all know my thing. Y'all know my testimony. But just in case you don't, Miss Stephanie, basically, God, sex, and love is how God drew me back to Him. My desire is to please Him, but I also had desires for all the rest of these things on the list. And I was single. And I was struggling with it. And I'm like, Lord, you know what I mean? Like, where my husband at then? Because I can't, be at peace with any of the things I want because of that. And then long story short, I get into my marriage where he's awesome. He's amazing. All these wonderful things. I'm just being honest here because I'm open transparent on here. That, I mean, the couple of things are that I just wish he would take more leadership in regards to our spiritual side of things. Cause like, I'm the one that's kind of like, taking me and my son to church and things of that nature. So I feel like he should take more of a lead in that. So I can't, let that go because that's a big, huge thing, right? And then, and then the other thing is the frequency of sex. Because I mean, obviously I have an issue and I'm in therapy now as well. So I'm like, well, maybe I need to go deeper about why I want it so much. But it seems like we're on a different wavelength of like, because he's the man and thinking about all the things, you know what I'm saying, outside of that. And I'm over here like, and I'm thinking about the things too, but I'm like, but when we're stressed, we can. And when we're, I'm just saying. So again, obviously those are two big things to me, and so it's hard or difficult to be like, I can let those things go. I can be patient with those things. I can do all that. But at the same time too, I don't know if I can ignore it completely.
Right.
So then be on the same page of everything being blissfully whatever, so I'm just saying I can relate.
And I work a lot of those two things, especially in my neurodiverse couples, because I kind of have two extremes of the autistic men. If I've got the really rigid, very cognitively inflexible, kind of legalistic autistic man, they take scripture too literally, and they can
Mm.
use scripture as a weapon, and they believe their leadership is more kind of authoritarian. My wife doesn't get a say. But then I
Hmm.
can also have the come see, come saw, well, whatever you want, dear, and really not taking that initiatorship. That's kind of how I see my husband and I, as we've kind of really been studying our marriage doctrine, as we really see leadership in the home as servant leadership, first of all. So it's not authoritarianism. And it's more like initiating. It's more like being
Hmm.
the one to initiate and like making sure we're all doing well, spiritually, because we were created for
Hmm.
relationship with God and then relationship with others. And
Hmm.
it's a completely normal desire for us to want a spiritual connection with our spouse and family, and to want to grow in that together, because sometimes if one is kind of growing spiritually and the other is not, it does cause space
Hmm.
between the two people, but you can't tell the person who's growing, well, you need to stop growing so that they'll catch up. And so like the more one grows and the one wants to stay stagnant, that's creating a spiritual intimacy gap, which can lead to physical intimacy gaps too, because intimacy is emotional and it's physical and it's intellectual and it's all kinds of sharing in life. It's social, and when
Hmm.
one of it's missing, you can feel it's missing, and
Hmm.
that's really what a lot of my neurodiverse couples are experiencing, especially the non-autistic spouse.
Mm. So I mean, so when you said that again, like I said, it resonated because I'm like, I feel the same way sometimes, and I feel bad to be the one that's always bringing the issues. But I was like, I don't want to, but I just don't want to not address it because I do take the Bible seriously. I do say, it's very clear about like what it would do to a marriage and what we should be doing and all that different type of stuff. And I ain't gonna lie, man, and temptations is all around, and I'm human at the end of the day. Like I don't want to sit here and, you know, even think about someone else, but at the same time, if you're in situations where I have to be patient and I have to wait and I know we got to exercise that stuff and have self-control. So I have to hold myself accountable as well. And God is holding me accountable as well as a wife. But I'm just saying, like, can you help me here? It's all. So it's been a struggle. But anyway, we got to keep talking about me. Um, so with these things and so you got this realization, right? And so how did conversation with your husband happen after that? Like what, so did he go and get a diagnosis, or like what did it look like
Yeah, so
at
I
that
was
point?
very fortunate. Sometimes a lot of men really push back and get angry about their wife coming to them. They're like, they're accusing me with autism. They're attacking me with autism. But in our situation, I was missing a lot of subtle cues. So when my daughter was going through the process and I was kind of explaining, to Dan, it was called Asperger's back then. Now it's autism level 1. But when she was getting diagnosed, and he would say things like, well, I do that, or that sounds like me, or that's how I think. I took that to mean he was pushing back on her diagnosis. I did not
Mm,
take it to mean that he was self-identifying. So when I
mm,
heard this at the conference, I called him up. He happened to be working from home that day. And I was like, hey, can you meet me for lunch here near the conference? It's only like one exit away. So he came and we were having lunch. And I was like, hey, so I was just at this conference and they were talking about adults on the spectrum. And have you ever thought you're on the spectrum? And he's like, yeah, I've been saying that to you for years. It's like, you have not. He's like, I have. I've been saying, I think like that, or that makes sense to me. And I was like, oh, he has been self-identifying. He has been,
mm,
bringing that to light. And
mm,
where I am really, really blessed, and where a lot of women are not, sadly, is when we figured this out, he was willing to go forward with the diagnosis and be open with the process. Sometimes some men specifically kind of push back on it, and how dare you, and I'm the head of the household and I don't have to do that, and you just need to submit, and that's not my guy.
mm,
So we just kind of started looking at the relationship differently, and then we just kind of felt, then the Lord put it on our hearts, like, hey, I'm Reverend Dr. Stephanie Holmes and I research autism and I miss my own husband. So it is probable that there are some other people
mm,
out there who have been missed. And I have been researching adult autism for the past few years. My
mm,
dissertation work is on autism. So, I was a licensed professional counselor, starting out, but then the Lord just totally shifted that to marriage and family coaching, specifically in the realm of autism and neurodiversity, because what we do know now, according to a 2019 study of 2.1 million people, is an 80% hereditary rate. So we are seeing if there is a child who is diagnosed on the spectrum without cognitive impairment, there's an 80% chance at least one parent and possibly grandparents or someone else in the family is on the spectrum, and it's been missed because we changed diagnostic criteria back in the 90s. And so they're calling that a lost generation. So in my own research of 300 people, we found that the average age of people getting diagnosed was between 40 and 49. And that's usually after marriage and after at least one child. So there's a lot of undiagnosed people out there. And so if you're struggling in your marriage and you just can't put your finger on it, usually wives are Googling, is my husband a narcissist? And autism is not narcissism, but one is selfishness for personal gain, and one is self-referencing. And the difference is a person on the spectrum sometimes does not have self-awareness to understand their impact of what they're doing on the situation. So while it looks selfish, a self-reference is different than someone who is selfish with the intention of hurting you, like a narcissist. But if you're the wife of that, it feels the same, especially if you don't know the difference between narcissism and autism. And so that's kind of where the search starts. Is my husband a narcissist? And then sometimes people are like, oh, it couldn't be narcissist. It might be autism. So that's kind of where I come in to help kind of differentiate between the two.
Wow. So, I mean, if we go back to the basics real quick, just for those that may, we hear autism and things of that nature, but maybe some still may not know. Like, how would you just, I guess, elevator pitch or just define, autism for people that are maybe struggling with, they hear the word all the time, but maybe they don't know. So,
yeah. So definitely I think the majority of us, and including myself, my very first introduction to autism was Rain Man, right? And so people tend to have this concept of someone on the spectrum who is unable to live independently, can't function, kind of has cognitive impairment with that. And for the longest time in the field of autism, that cognitive impairment, the word we no longer use, retarded, because that has become a slur word, but we used to attach that to autism. It was in the 80s and 90s that researchers started saying, wait a minute, you can be on the autism spectrum and be gifted, like Elon Musk. Elon Musk has recently kind of come out and said he was diagnosed with Asperger's. You can like or dislike Elon Musk, but you cannot argue with the fact that he is intelligent and a successful businessman. You may not like his politics, you may not like his personality, but you cannot argue that he is a successful person. And so now as we have this huge spectrum from, say, Rain Man to Elon Musk, so what does that mean? So we're kind of looking for, there might be a sensory profile, someone sensory averse, like, ooh, that's too much, or sensory seeking. They explore the world, through their senses. The biggest issue is going to be social relational communication, not really always understanding the perspective of the other person, because autism means self-ism, like automobile, that same word, auto. So autism is like in my bubble, in my sphere, unable at times to put myself in your shoes or see your perspective. So there might be different behaviors for children and teenagers, but you can imagine in a marriage situation, if someone can't see another person's perspective, doesn't even know that they're not seeing the other person's perspective, or isn't showing compassionate care when someone is in need, what that does long term to the relationship. So it's a social relational difference. It can have sensory components. It can also have the person, like any Star Trek fans out there, my husband was a combination of Spock and Data, the android, from the 2 different episodes. There'd be times I was like, he's so intellectualizing this. I'm like, you're just over the top with your analytics and logic. And then there's other times when I would make a statement about something that I needed, and he'd kind of look at me and be like, what are you talking about? And I would joke and say, do you not have your emotion chip in? Was your emotion chip not put in at manufacturing? And so there'd be this like, oh my goodness, you're so smart, but at the same time, lacking some common sense and just basic social communication, not reading the room. not knowing when to
Mm,
speak, when not to speak, not knowing when you're over, like monologuing and taking over and people have checked out. So
mm,
those are the kind of things that we're looking for. And so, and I tell one of the, it's a misconception that eye contact is a big thing. Oh, well, my husband or my child makes eye contact. Well, let me tell you this. If you grew up in the South, or if you grew up in Christian culture, if you do not get eye contact, you will have your eyes slapped out of your head. So you are conditioned in the South, you are conditioned in Christian culture. You must give eye contact to your elders, or that is a lack of respect. So
mm.
just because someone might be giving eye contact might not mean they're enjoying it, or it's not very stressful for them, because many of us were conditioned that eye contact is the key to
Mm.
respect based on how you were brought up.
Ah, man. So, and well, so now you're saying, you're in this marriage, and now you're saying your daughter is married now as well, right? And so, you know, well, I'm sure, I mean, she would, I guess, have the more testimony to say, but I guess from your observation, like, the dating process and the gentleman she's with and things of that nature. Um, and I mean, I'm assuming he's understanding and knows, and things like that. I don't know if you guys have conversations or are they the same? Like, I'm just curious as to how that marriage is going with knowing up front her situation.
Yeah. So there's definitely kind of like the two different populations. So people my age and older, when they've gone decades in a marriage, going like, what in the world is going on here? Like, I just told you my friend died and you didn't like offer me a hug. You're like, that's nice. And you went and changed the oil. Like, what? Where's the disconnect? Right. And so when these
Mm-hmm.
little things have happened for decades and decades and it's undiagnosed, you're like, what's wrong with me? And I've read every single book and we've been to 10 therapists, and why can't we get something to work? So that's like a different scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas for my daughter, finding out a young age, having supports, going through, her own therapy. And then when she met who is now her husband, I was like, I want y'all to have pre-engagement kind of counseling coaching, because y'all need to talk about autism and ADHD and neurodiversity in marriage. You need to know what you're getting into so
Mm-hmm.
you can start making those adjustments of expectations, because that's really the pain for women 40 and older. Is they read all the marriage books. If you do this, you're going to have this perfect Christian utopian marriage, which by the way doesn't exist for anyone. But I've read this, I've done this, I'm the submissive wife, I've done the love languages, I'm having sex 3 times a week, and we just can't connect. You feel as a
Mm-hmm.
woman like, what's wrong with me? Why doesn't
Mm-hmm.
my husband want to have sex with me? Or why doesn't he won't read the books? Or why am I seeking counseling and he's not? So
Mm,
that caused a lot more pain and trauma. But for this younger generation, there's less stigma over ADHD and autism. And so they're more kind of upfront on, talking to their spouse partner about it, who they're dating,
mhm,
and they're setting those expectations differently when
mhm,
they're engaged and getting married, versus it's a little bit harder. You kind of have this thing in your head of what marriage looks like when you're my age. And it's like, okay, new data, new information, we're going to have to change some expectations. Some of those things are not going to
mm,
happen, and some of those things are going to happen differently. We have to
mhm,
be in collaboration over how that works so that we're accommodating each other, versus the neurotypical saying, well, you just need to be more neurotypical. And the autistic partner saying, well, I just want more space and you need to leave me alone. If you're going to be in marriage together, you've got to figure out how to navigate that alone time and the related time so that each person feels like they're getting something from marriage and one person's not
mm,
just constantly acquiescing to the other person's needs.
mm. I mean, honestly, that sounds just like regular marriage woes. So, are we all autistic?
We are not. We are not.
No, I mean, I'm being funny with that, but still, I
Uh,
mean, it's like because yeah, I mean, I think about like a friend of mine, we go out every now and then because it's like so our husbands, I guess, some people swear by date nights, and then some couples are like, we're trying to get it together, but we haven't, and so me and her have taken the initiative to be like, well, we'll take ourselves out. And so we call ourselves the World Housewives, or, the town we're in. We're like, we're going to have a, just wife day or whatever the case is. And, we're talking about different things. And obviously there's things we're relating to, some things not, that type of thing. I know everybody's marriage is different and stuff, but, Yeah, I mean, but yeah, I guess I'm just thinking about the things you're sharing here, and it does sound like, it sounds like the things I go through, sounds like things we go, so it's like, I mean, I know you already said there's a lot more people that may not know. Um, it's just, I don't know. I'm gonna just hush
I'll
it
tell
up.
you something I would love to see that the local church would do better. And so there are some things that are kind of men women differences. This is where it gets a little controversial. This is where I have a little bit of problem with most of our mainline churches. We
Mm,
condition we say that marriage is the mantle of the servant leader. We put the pressure on the women. If your
mm,
marriage isn't going well, you're not submitting enough. You're not praying enough. You're not being faithful enough. You're not staying fit enough. You're not serving him enough. And all the pressure comes on the women to carry the mantle, but that's not our mantle to carry. We are not hearing from the pulpit and men's group, hey guys, how are you serving? How are you serving your family? How are you doing on that servant leadership? Where's that accountability on? Are you taking your wife out? Are you really getting to know her? Have you just settled in because you're like, hey, divorce is off the table? I really hate that phrase now. It sounds so great, like when we got married, divorce was off the table. Huh, huh, huh. Yeah, but that also means you don't feel like you need to do anything to keep your spouse. You're just hoping that that covenant marriage is going to hem her in and trap her in. What are you
mm,
doing that she wants to stay in that covenant marriage with you? And not just because Jesus told her to, but because she wants to be in the marriage with you, because you see her, you know her, you're validating her, you're connecting with her, you're creating intimacy with her, not just sex. And men are not taught how to do that. They are not
mm,
told how to be vulnerable, how to be curious, and how to be teachable. So when I'm
mm,
working with a couple, no matter who's neurotypical and who's neurodiverse, and I was like, I will not work with you if you're not, first of all, teachable. If you're unteachable, you're unreachable. So that's a strike one. Strike one. And
that's a
then you
good
must be
one.
humble. You must be willing to be vulnerable. And you must be curious about your partner. If you're not even curious about your spouse's autism, or you're not curious about how your wife's neurotypical brain works, and you just want her to just bow down to you and do all the things that make you comfortable, we feel like, my husband and I feel like those are four main things that are absolutely necessary to enter into coaching or counseling, because your coach or counselor cannot change your will, cannot change your heart, cannot change your mindset, cannot change your bad marriage theology. So you have to enter in with a mind and a heart willing to learn and open, and you got to let the pride down. You must be humble. It starts with
Mm,
humility of like, what am I bringing to this that I need to change? Not so focused on what you need to change. I'm focused on me, you're focused on you, and together we'll build a new marriage with two healthier people. And so that can be a little bit more problematic in our neurodiverse relationship. If the wife is really stuck on, I want my husband to be neurotypical, so that's not going to happen. Or if the man is really stuck on, well, I'm the head of the house and I don't have to do anything I don't want to do, because they're really cognitively inflexible in their autism, but they think that the Bible, God, and the church is supporting that cognitive inflexibility. That creates an unhealthy marriage dynamic.
whew. I guess I'm just the amen corner over here right now. I could definitely, agree with, I just like say just about everything you were saying there. I know that it's very interesting that, that observation about the church, because at the end of the day, the Bible is very clear about like, and the man, you know, loving the wife as he loves, as Christ loved the church. Which, I mean, if we looked at how Christ loved the church, he laid down his life for the church. And so, there is a servant's thing that should be happening on both ends, and things like that. And so I guess that, look, she just called you all out, preacher men and whatnot, pastors. I guess now we don't know what's happening in men meetings. I mean, maybe they are talking about. I don't know, but because it's
Well,
usually
I'll
all men.
tell you what I
But
have heard, and this also is controversial and really upsets me, is in a lot of men's group, men are being told, if your wife is still willing to have sex with you, then your relationship is good. Like, whoo, when she closes the door and she doesn't want to have sex with you, that's when you should be concerned. Then over here to the women, no matter what happens, you better be having sex, because if you don't have sex with him, he is going to have a porn problem. He is going to cheat on you. And if he cheats on you, or if he's looking at porn, that is on you. Do you see how those two messages are kind of a catch-22 for the woman?
Well, as somebody on the opposite end of both of those situations, I mean, and we're going to address this on GSL more. But I mean, like, what about me then? Because whose fault is it? Okay, let me stop. Is it still my fault?
Well, I think we each have to take personal responsibility for our self-control, and we still, request our needs, and hopefully in a healthy relationship, I'm responsible for my own lust or my own self-control issues. I'm going to stay accountable to that, but I am married and we are in a partnership. So we need to talk about how we're going to grow that intimacy relationship together. And in many marriages, there's a libido mismatch. We always think it's the man who has the high libido, but you listeners, I highly recommend The Great Sex Rescue by Sheila Gregoire, talking about, we have so many concepts in the Christian church that only men are visual, only men want sex, only men have a libido. Women shouldn't enjoy it. Women shouldn't seek it, in their spouse. Like, that's the husband's job only to initiate. It's a great book, by the way. And it really talks about how some of our leading Christian self-help books have really led to this problem, and what we're teaching men and what we're teaching women, which is not really scriptural. It is these writers' personal philosophy and theology, their personal word that they are writing, not usually research-based, and usually based on their specific theological background, but yet they become bestsellers. They get mentioned from the pulpit, and they become equal to the gospel for some people. And so, great book, Great Sex Rescue, life-changing. That was certainly what I grew up in, and I was like, whoa. And it totally changed the conversation, of sex and intimacy in our own marriage too.
And that's the thing that I was going to say. I mean, you already said it, but I'm just going to reiterate here. Like, why are we, I feel like I had this conversation recently. Why are we adding to the Bible? Like, we, again, all the things that you were saying, I'm like, that's not even what the word has to say about sex. You know what I mean? That's not what it has to say about what a marriage, the marriage bed should look like and things of that nature. Like, it's very clear about, okay, this, not depriving one another, and coming together and making sure that, okay, you're communicating, if you're going to take some time for fasting, X, Y, and Z, but outside of that, come on back. Like, and it's a mutual, like, they both got to come together and have that conversation type of thing, not that one spouse is more control over it than the other spouse, and all the other rhetoric that we often hear, that often gets passed more around than the Bible. But I mean, I guess on one hand, that's not anything new. We're gonna always hear the opposite of whatever the Bible's saying. But still, I'm like, if we're gonna proclaim to be inspired by, or whatever the case may be, then why can't we at least acknowledge what it actually says and do that? Like, that's the part that's always been it's constantly been confusing for me on this journey I'm on. But I mean, I just try to keep studying and learning and all that good stuff.
Right. And I think it's a really good point that The Great Sex Rescue talks about, because it's based on research of 20,000 Christian women based on what they were taught about the purity culture and sexuality. There's a lack of what's coming off the pulpit. And really, we women have been kind of conditioned in small groups and these books, even more from the pulpit. Some of the Christian self-help books, or the small groups that we're in, where the mentor woman is kind of putting this pressure on, to be this like perfect wife, so you get these perfect results. But I'm not responsible for my husband's spirituality. I'm not responsible for my husband's sexuality. I'm not responsible for what he does or does not do. I'm responsible for me, and I'm responsible for my Lord, and I'm responsible for my own, journey. I can make petitions and requests, but in the end, he's standing before Jesus and I'm standing before Jesus, and our marriage is a us thing. And I believe that the man's going to carry more weight when he stands before Jesus, because he has the mantle of the marriage on him, not the wives. And just reading that book just kind of opened my eyes, because I had read all the books that she mentioned, and I was like, and that's why I never wanted to use there. I would stop using those books in my own counseling practice. Like, something is off here. When they read this book, their marriage got worse, so I was like, I just stopped using them, but I didn't have a reason why. her research shows the why. What are the messages really in this book? And I was like, I just had a wisdom of like, I'm not using those, but a lot of people have when they've come to me, they've read these same books that are millions and millions of copies sold in the United States. And we Americans are the most consumers of these Christian marriage books, kind of after this Christian marriage that looks a certain way, because like our image of who we are is so tied to our marriage. We've really made marriage an idol in American Christianity, in my humble opinion.
I mean, yeah, you definitely have. I think again on my journey, like I said, when I was single and being like, I'm ready for marriage now, and God was humbling me to be like, yeah, you getting ready, but and definitely I feel like again, my husband, he didn't bring my husband to my life or vice versa until I knew to still put him first, regardless of my husband. You know what I mean? Put God first and things of that nature. So, and that is helping me even today, even with the things I told you about. Because at the end of the day, I was sharing with someone actually earlier that, I can't deny that my spiritual growth and maturity and in prayer and all the things have been a huge part of me getting to where I am mentally, but then also staying in my marriage and not just dropping, the ball at the first signs of like inconsistency or my desires and not needs and not being met, things of that nature. When a lot of us, again, when we don't have that relationship with Christ and things of that nature, those are those first things that we are thinking about divorce. We are thinking about, things of that nature. And so it's good to have that relationship with God. So what I'm hearing today, and I don't know if you're saying this, but I'm going to say this part, I guess, is, maybe, again, let's stick to what the Bible got to say about marriage and all that stuff. Like the other books and stuff is good. And I know even when I do daily inspiration and stuff and I'm sharing, I'm like, at the end of the day, again, like I can sit here and be lying to you guys at the end of the day. Like just read it for yourself, and take that. Like, I mean, there's so much godly wisdom obviously in the Bible and about every aspect of life. That's what I'm learning. And the more I study and stuff, the more I'm seeing that like whatever question you may have is there. So just take that and you can go deeper. I'm not saying never read no other books or something, but again, that's where we got to use discernment, right? Chew up the meat, spit out the
Turn
bones,
on your
all the other
brain.
stuff.
Use your brain.
Yeah, like, okay, does this line up? Like that's where you I guess do the compare and contrast list. Like, okay, these sound good, this sound good, this sounds good. What does the Bible say? Okay, and I mean, if we're gonna be believers, we're talking about believers right now, not people that don't believe. But yeah, that girl, we can sit here and talk all day. Let me stop. Because this subject right here is I guess is resonating right now. But I mean, I don't want to be long your time. I know you have, probably coaching and all kinds of amazing things to do. But I would love to, give you an opportunity to share more about like, the things you've been working on right now, things we should look out for, how can we reach you? Feel free, whatever you like to share.
Sure. So I think the first thing, when my husband, we had kind of talked about ministering to neurodiverse Christian couples, we really feel called to neurodiversity in the church and the Christian community. So there's like a new concept out there called neurodiverse couples, but we're a sub niche in that called neurodiverse Christian couples. So we have a podcast solely devoted to that, where we have theologians and Bible scholars on to kind of debate some bad theology that we've been taught. What does the Hebrew and Greek really say? Sometimes it's autism research, like what's happening in the brain, what's the neuroscience. And sometimes it's just Stan and I talking about our relationship, how we're growing and how we're learning to accommodate each other. Because also part of Ephesians 5, before we get to wives, submit to your husbands, it says, submit yourself one to another. That's a very important verse that's often left out. And so we're still learning to submit ourselves one to another. And what does that look like? So we developed the podcast. And then last year, my daughter wanted to kind of write a book with me about her journey, because I had written a book a while back and I was talking about her journey from my point of view. And she's like, I'm 20 something now, and I'd really like to talk about my own journey. So it was going to be a me and her book became a family book. So that book is Embracing the Autism Spectrum, Finding Hope and Joy, Navigating Your Neurodiverse Family Journey. And that's my daughter's diagnosis, and then my second daughter was diagnosed with ADHD. So she talks about a sibling's perspective of growing up with someone on the spectrum. My husband talks about his diagnostic journey, and I kind of talk about how I was the mom, kind of losing my identity to everyone else's needs, and how I had to find my own identity. So that's that just got published. We're in process right now of publishing a book called Uniquely Us, Gracefully Navigating the Neurodiverse Marriage. And it is research-based, scholar-based, and then a lot of people's stories where we interviewed a bunch of couples. So it's not just Dan and I's story, it's several people's story. And so that's coming out maybe late in 2024, early 2025. But you find all of that at www.christianneurodiversemarriage.com.
Awesome, man. Well, I am excited about everything that you and your family is embarking on. I'm glad to hear that God is using this thing for his glory, and that it seems like everybody has obviously their own testimonies to share. And so that's a beautiful thing. Look what God has done, man. He took this thing, and then now everybody's flourishing and growing in their own way. And so all of you all are welcome to come back one day. I would love to, if people want to come and share their side of, the conversation and whatnot, and your family, feel free to let them know that they're welcome to come here. And yeah, is there anything else you want to share with us before you go?
No, I think just kind of starting the conversation about autism and marriage and family, it's really important to us to break the stigma about neurodiversity, to stop seeing it as it's not a mental health condition, by the way. It is a different wiring. And so different wiring, different people, God made different types of brains. And, we need to learn how to accommodate each other's brain and wiring as well. So that's kind of another one of our messages is let's break down stigma and stereotypes of what we think ADHD and autism is. It's not a spiritual thing. It's not a lack of character thing. It's a neurological difference. And us speaking about it, we just want to make it known that we're not ashamed of who we are as a marriage and family. And if that's part of your story, maybe embrace that and look into that a little bit more.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stephanie. Thanks for visiting us. Thank you so much for watching the GSL Talk Show, and thank you to Dr. Stephanie for joining us tonight. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Check out her books and the rest of her endeavors. And friends, definitely, if you've learned something tonight or you think you may be married to someone on the spectrum, by all means, check out the resources. And let's get diagnosed, man. Let's do what is necessary to save our marriages and move forward the way God wants us to. Y'all have a good night.